to say after watching this movie. Actually, I know most of them. Professor Yeon's father attends my church a couple of years ago. When I was visiting North Korea, he wanted to have a naengmyeon with me, cold noodle with me. And he said, I asked him to bless the meal. And he started saying, 하나님, Reverend Kim is going to my hometown. And he started crying. And he said, I want to see my father. And he started crying. So cold noodle became warm noodle. I went to North Korea with the Jeonsundae and some other people there. The trauma of the Korean War still exists. Somebody has to do study on trauma that still exists in our bone and in our mind and our psyche. The professor of psychology here. My father was the youngest of 6 children. My grandfather was a pastor. And after Kim Il-sung took over, he was in prison. And my father's eldest brother was a part of the Moscow leadership. He worked with the Kim Il-sung. And he told my father and my father's older brother to go down to South because they cannot stay. And on the way down, his older brother captured and he was taken back. And my father was the only one who came down. I remember growing up that he was a pastor also, but some Sunday nights he would lock his door and I would hear him opening up a can of beer. He never shared. Even these days, to talk about what they went through, it's very difficult for them. Many years ago, we had a conference on experience of Korean War, and those who came down from North when they were young, when they escape from North Korea, they have to be quiet. Their parents hold their mouth to stay quiet. Some kids die because they couldn't breathe, because if you talk, you get shot from both sides. There are many pastors who were little during those years, came out to share their journey of coming down to South. And they said, this is the first time I ever talked about coming down to South, because we were told, they have this trauma that you're not supposed to talk. You're not supposed to talk, because that's when you're 1, 2 years old, your parents hold your mouth saying, don't talk. And it somehow translated into their own that you're not supposed to talk about your journey down to South. Now, I'm one of the lucky ones. When my father passed away, my mom drew me a bunch of a diary which my father wrote when he came 16 and until he died 47. He started with every day he said, Mom, Dad, I want to see you. 10 years later, he write, I wish they're still alive. 10 years later, I wish I can find their tombstones, tombs. I found my grandfather's tomb near Kaesong. I met my aunts. All my father's brothers passed away. I don't know whether you understand the magnitude of the Korean War. We had about 20 million South Koreans then, 10 million. 2 million died. 2 million North Koreans died, mostly men. So that generation of men wiped out. million South Koreans, about 500,000 Chinese, about 10,000, 100,000 US, 50,000.
36.
Yeah.
36,000.
And my father talked about young American GIs crying at night, "Mommy, mommy," during winter retreat. 35,000 young GIs died. First of all, I thank you for hosting this kind of meeting because this is a forgotten issue for many people. This is one of the few places where I feel safe to talk about this kind of things. When I was back in Chicago, there will be 100 people outside protesting whenever we have a program like this. So this is weird to have a safe place to talk. I was refused to enter South Korea for 5 years because of my work with reunification work. I was labeled as a communist, which I was not. I'm very conservative when it comes to ideology, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So I thank you for this. If we solve this problem of South North Korea, I think we'll probably be able to solve most of the other peace and conflict issues in the world. Korean War ended or signed the armistice 60 years ago, but it's not ended, as Jian said. Bruce Cummings and I had a church in University of Chicago. Bruce Cummings taught there. Korean CIA made sure all the foreign students do not attend my church, not attend Bruce Cummings' classes. So Bruce Cummings approached me whether we want to file against the Korean government, the FBI. And I said no, because I didn't want to use my own US government to do investigation on my motherland, so I decided not to. But it's still the issue. Even a few years ago, until a few years ago, the Korean attaché who's in charge of who's a part of the Korean CIA reviewed my sermon. My sermon is very evangelical. But they have to listen to my sermon. Every time they have a change of step, they have to listen. Consul General is a member of my church. They still don't matter. They have to review my sermons. This is the issue that rationality it's not a part of the discussion when it comes to reunification issue. People don't care about facts. Emotion flies all over. Even these days, it's so emotionally charged the issue. And a lot of ignorances. In fact, last Sunday I met a congressman who is a part of the Armed Forces subcommittee chair for Korea. He came to my church because November is election. So people are running for senator, U.S. Senate, coming to our church. Already 2 people came, most of them Republicans in Georgia. And I asked him about the reunification issue. He said, what he shared was all North Korea's fault. There's such thing as original sin. They are fixed about their idea about North Korea. Once you have this fixation, you don't want to open up any possibility of anything, even after 60 years. Illogical, emotional, irrational. When it comes to North Korea, I don't think it matters whether you're a Democrat or Republican. They're all same, in my opinion. If we can solve peaceful reconciliation, reunification of Korea, I think you will probably to solve any problem in the world. Last week's Sojourner, Jim Wallace wrote, rephrasing from some other person, he said, God created the world, and we created borders. God created the world, and we created borders. Most of us are Christians, right? What Mr. Chonsunte talked about, after bombing, the priest came and they had a mass. I don't know whether you're old enough. I came here in 1979 to do my MD, so I'm quite old. I finished my MD in 1982. When our government bombed Iraq, first war, Iraq war, U.S. Air Force bombed Iraq right after Billy Graham blessed first Bush, and then we bombed. 100,000 Iraqis died. I couldn't take it, so I went out to Federal Building. I usually don't wear cloth color, but when I do demonstration, I wear cloth color. I did a solo demonstration. I put big sign. Those 100,000 Iraqis who died by our bombing, my tax money, were also God's children. And I did this in front of Federal Building. About 12 mounted police with horse came, and I thought they were charging me and taking me away, but they were actually surrounding me to protect me. People shouted at me, "Go back to your country." I came here when I was 16, so this is my own country, but we as Christians have to really see this North Korean issue with the heart of Christ. Otherwise, this will not be solved. This problem will not be able to. Nobody will want to be part of this unless you want to have heart of Christ. Internally, North Korea GNP officially is 2,000 per individual. I would say it's 200. South Korea is 20,000, so about 101. South Koreans, one individual makes about 100 times more than North Korea. But North Korea has to spend 25% of national GNP for military purpose. South Korea 2.5. So it's about 1,000 to 1, which means North Korea is actually, whenever we have this military practice, we call practice, US and South Korea joint practice, they have to spend millions of dollars to prepare. So the suffering and the hunger, devastation of North Korea is not only their problem, we are causing it. I went to North Korea and I told them, why can't you just sit still when US and South Korea practice military exercise? They said, we cannot. We don't know whether it's a practice or war games. Once they start crossing over, Pyongyang and Seoul is about 1 hour distance. South and North together is smaller than Michigan Lake. Wow. You can dip Korea and take it out. But last week, the UN Human Rights Commission had a report on North Korea. Kim Jong-un is now being charged for crime against humanity. I don't know what they will do, but it complicates more. We demonize North Korea more. Once you demonize, you have no feeling of killing the people. That's what we've been doing with Iraq and all that. Once we have people with different ideas and different ideologies, we demonize them and we kill them without any feeling attached to it. When North Korea was building up a nuclear bomb, I was watching CNN and people came out and talked about war games as if the North Korea, there's no people living in North Korea. But North Koreans are just like us. If you put their names and face, you wouldn't be able to treat any human being like that. But when we talk about North Korea, we forget that they're people. They're my cousins. This is my father's homeland. I visit there every year. Before 1990, I involved in reunification issues, more political issues, but after 95, I'm more involved in humanitarian work, so I don't visit Pyongyang too much. Because Pyongyang asks me too many things, so I don't want to, I can't do ministry once I get involved with Pyongyang too much. So instead of Pyongyang, I go to Najin, Sondong, to work with humanitarian, with my Christian groups. 1990, 2 million North Koreans died out of hunger. But I say it was not natural disaster, it was a man-made disaster. 2 million. Kim dynasty since Korean War last 60 years, still going on. It complicates everything. 8 years ago, I was traveling in Hamgyong province. They, see, strange thing about North Korean government, they let me do whatever I like to do there. When I request something, they always take me to new places. Every time I go, they find my relatives without, I don't ask them, but they always find somebody. I think they see me very useful, but anyway, it's a long story. But I was traveling Hamgyong province. I saw junior high level boys working on the highway. So I told one of the government officers, why do you let this junior high kids do labor instead of letting them study in school? And he had a tear. He said, they're not junior high kids. They are our soldiers. Because of the famine, whole nation was suffering. They were not soldiers. They were soldiers, but their heights were so small. I'm afraid the whole generation is being wiped out because of these issues. So this is very serious issues. In relations with South Korea, we're same people. We share 5,000 year history together. I have relatives there. Still 10 million separate families. Last week, both South and North Korean government allowed the separate families to meet. 80,000 applied, only 80 people were allowed. It's like a lottery. And most of them are dying, 92, 95. I don't know what kind of government, whether it's North Korea or South Korea, is allowing this to happen. You know, mother and son, father and daughter, they don't mean no harm to anybody, but it's not being possible. Both countries are one of the top military build-up countries. That poses a lot of trouble. Peace in Asia. For South Korea to not to resolve this issue in North Korea, South Korea will not prosper any longer. Former Minister of Reunification of Korea, Han Sang, he after attending an APEC meeting, he came to Atlanta and we had a lunch and he said, you know what Lee Kuan-yew at Singapore Premier said to me? He said, I don't worry about South Korea, he said, because you are running 100-meter race with the big small brother on your shoulder. You will always be, once you start the race, you will slow down. South Korea will never prosper. Lee Kuan-yew at Singapore. He said, unless we solve this problem, South Korea will not prosper in the future. So this is not only a North Korean issue, it's a South Korean issue. About historical background, you saw, this is beautifully done. I thank you for this. What's at stake? Peace. Cost of military buildup and maintenance. South Korea is suffering, and especially U.S. government is asking South Korea government to pay for their stationing in Korea now. Millions of dollars. North Korea, 100 times harder. So we are actually contributing greatly to the hunger and famine of North Korea. Remember, whenever we do military exercise, it costs $100 million. North Korea has to do the same thing. So this is really inhumane military. Why do we need a military exercise? This is, but You know the answer. South Korea is one of the country buying most of U.S. Military equipment. Millions of dollars. Do you see the point? U.S. government need this tension in order for our government here to sell all those expensive. You know that chopper? I don't know what you call that, a tomahawk or whatever. $100 million. And Korea is buying. I think Korea is one of the top buyer of all the military equipment. Millions of dollars. So who is benefiting from all this tension? Japan is benefiting. Our own government is benefiting from this. Something we have to know. Not only actual military expense, but cost of human cost is enormous. I mentioned about trauma. Trauma of Korean people. My father's trauma is in me. It's not over. Even our church, even see, I have a rather big church. But whenever I mention our reunification issues, the flags rise up, people walk out. I don't talk about any political issues. I talk about human issues. It really don't matter. Emotion flies all over. Human trauma. I remember one of the right-wing leader who was a president of a Korean separate family in Chicago. He wanted to meet with me. He yelled at me, shouted at me, he labeled me as a communist. But after he calmed down, I told him, Mr. Kim, don't you want to meet your family? Because he is a separate family. He said, I trust South Korean government, Red Cross, and I'll wait until they find me a way. I said, you will never be able to meet your family. Let me help you. He started crying. He started crying. I want South Korean government to help me. He died before he met a family. To me, it really don't matter whether you're left inclined or right inclined. All of us are suffering because of this. Even these days. Every year I visit North Korea. Boston is cold, but North Korea is very cold. Not only weather-wise, if you see their face, a frozen face, frozen land, frozen face, frozen future. It really hurt my heart whenever I see them. I remember visiting orphanage. There was a young boy with a TB, tuberculosis.
Oh, TB.
He was coughing, and somehow I wanted to pray for him. So I asked the person in charge whether I can pray for this boy. He said, okay. After I prayed for him, he said, thank you, 아저씨, which means like uncle. Uncle. But who knows? He might be my nephew, because my father was the only one who escaped. I couldn't turn away from him. I hugged him again. I cried and cried. A lot of crying. We have to find a win-win solution. Win-win solution. Because there's no other option. Worst scenario is 20 million Koreans, North Koreans, just coming down to South Korea, crossing over 38th parallel. That's the worst scenario. Other worst scenario is US and Korean, South Korean army invading North Korea. You will never win the war. We see Iraq, we see Afghanistan, same thing. You cannot win the war. Peaceful solution has to be there. South Korea has to prepare. US, China, Japan, instead of blocking it, they have to help us. They are stakeholders. There are a lot of hopeful signs. About 10 years ago, I went to Kumgang Mountain. And there were two guys, were one North Korean young man and the other South Korean young college girl. And we were walking, climbing the mountain. He said, "Aren't you guys enemy?" And they were saying, "No, here, reunification already happened." Our young people. They're North Korean. This is North Korean boy. This is South Korean girl. But unless they tell you they are from North Korea, South, they're exactly the same people. Young people. 6-7 years ago, on the way back to USA, there was a 32-year-old, really bright young mother who studied in Switzerland in high school. She was a North Korean. She was a translator. As we were departing, she called me out on the side and she asked me, "Pastor Kim, can you pray for me?" This is a North Korean woman. I said, "Why? You don't believe in God." You know what she said? "You know, after spending 1 week with you, I have this strong urge that if you ask for your God about my problem, I think He will help me." I was so dumbfounded. I never talked about God. But she knows that I'm a pastor. But we spent a week together because I was there with some American pastors. The strong desire to change the situation they are living in. Last year I visited Sorok Island. I don't know whether you know Sorok Island. The last part of South Korea. If you take a look at Korean map, Sorok Island is the last island that holds south and holds north. Sorok Island is an island for lepers. During Japanese colonialism, they put all the lepers into the island. I had a 4 o'clock early morning prayer. I had to preach. 4 o'clock in the morning. I went there. They were already there. I never met that many lepers in my life. They didn't have fingers. Their lips were twisted. They're singing, clapping, hymns. And I was dumbfounded to see that these lepers, when they were praying in loud, they were praying for growth of church, praying for reunification of Korea. They were isolated, they were deserted by family and society, but every morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't know whether any other nation, any other Christians get up that early and pray. But every morning, 4 o'clock, they were praying loud for peace and reunification of Korea. Oh my God, I was just really dumbfounded by that fact. They were crying. Do you know what lepers? Lepers, Hansen disease. No fingers. You know, all those things. But they were earnestly praying. I see a lot of hopeful signs. Small beginning we need. I hope to see the North Korean government to open up their railroad. And they can make money doing that. South Korean business people have to get their goods from China and Russia. If they open a railroad, North Korean government can just take money for what do you call it, tariff, tax. I think that will be a good beginning. If that's opening up, South Korean young college students can travel to Europe and China and then Russia, and even in Africa with the railroad, with a backpack in there. Those are small things that we can ask the government. I want to challenge, I was talking with my colleagues that And there are a lot of interpretation about how Germany was reunified. Before the Berlin Wall collapsed, in Eastern Germany, they never gave up praying. Church, Dresden, I forgot the name of the German city, but the church called Nikolai Church, there were 20 people praying for reunification of Germany. 200 people, 2,000 people. One day, people came out, 20,000 people came out with the candlelights. Next day, Berlin Wall collapsed. We found out that Western Germany pastors shared their salary after division of Germany. They've been sharing their salary with the Eastern German pastors. So although nation was divided, East Germans never gave up praying. Western Germans never gave up sharing. I think this is something we have to do. I'm going to propose our gathering in April for Korean pastors that we start doing it. Share out 1% of our salary with North Koreans. I don't know how they're going to use it, but we have to find a way. It's a good beginning. In July, Reverend Chang is taking leadership. We will have a rally in Washington, D.C. to change armistice into peace treaty. Next year, we are going to invite United Methodist bishops to go with us to North and South. Bishop Chung is working on it. There are a lot of things. I wish that we always be mindful that when we talk about North Korean issues, we have names and faces. Even when we talk about homosexual issues, same thing in our denomination. We have to know there's a face there and names there. When we talk about social issues, we talk about issues as if there's no human being involved. But there are human involved in North Korean issues. Jesus talked about Samaria a lot. He said, I must go through Samaria. Remember that? To South Koreans, North Korea is Samaria. But Jesus intentionally talked about, I must go through Samaria. If you're a Christian, that's a mandate from Christ. He talks about Good Samaritan. He meets Samaritan woman. He talks about one Samaritan leper who came back and thanked him. And he said, I must go through Samaria. This is a challenge for our church. Second, Jesus talks about loving the least among us. Whatever we do to least among us is you do it to me. Jesus talks, actually, Old Testament talk about loving our neighbors. But Jesus talks about loving our enemies. Right. And that's a challenge to us. That's a challenge to us. I'll stop here. I can go on.
Thank you. Okay, so we are here, so this is a time for conversations, questions, comment, and to value our time together. When you ask questions, I think you can be, time sensitive. And also, you can also direct your question either to Professor Lim or Reverend Kim or to both. And since the size of the group, I think we can have a good conversation. So, any questions?
I have one.
Yes.
On the news, we hear about the sort of the North Korean aggression towards the South. I remember a couple of years back, the North Koreans, I think they sent a missile, they bombed in front of your
terminal island.
Yeah, that was South Korean island, right? What is the people's stance on that? Or would you say the people of Korea are divided based on of South Korea divided about the situation with the unification of North and South Korea? And anyone?
Well, the government position is clear that the aggression was started by North Korea. But to assume that North Korea will provoke without any any reason is really insensitive. South Korean government always make it as such a North Korea irrational and they will provoke all that. But if you study, South Korea also was practicing war. They were bombing North Korea area. So North Korea remind South Korean government stop it. And when South Korea decided not to stop it, they provoked it. That's a sad event actually. It really irritates whole national fear. Really unfortunate. But you're dealing with the North Koreans who are really, I don't know whether I can use this, uptight, and really they are always ready to respond with the force. In my personal opinion, that's all they have. They're angry. They're ready to show their force, but usually they get more bombing afterward from South Korea. Just like when Palestinians or Arab people attack Israel, usually about 10 times more
Yes.
Arabs die.
Yeah.
But in Western media, it appears as if Palestinians are irrational people. They do stupid things and they deserve it. But if you really take a look at it, it's not like that.
So you're saying it's probably, when you talk about South Korea's bombing, is it due to the war games, the war exercises that are
I think that's a
happening?
big part of it.
The war
I think this week they are doing a war exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know why they're not stopping it. That's just so unfortunate.
The other thing about that particular incident
Sure.
is that part of what Urban Kim is referring to is activities of the South Korean naval fleet on the western coast of the peninsula. There's something called the National Limit Line. If you actually trace the DMZ, the current demarcation line, and you extend it west into the water and east into the water, there's a natural progression along that line that basically, divides the waters between the northern part and the southern part along the same sort of dimension as the DMZ on land. But if you look at the national limit line, which is what South Korea and the United States considers to be the extension of the DMZ into the western waters, it actually goes up the coast. So if you look at where these activities are taking place, they're within viewing distance of North Korean coastline. That national limit line was unilaterally drawn by the United States and UN occupied forces at the end of the war. It's never been recognized by the North Koreans, although they have, basically.
They accepted it then.
Well,
They had to.
They had to because they had no option at the time. But if you want to think about the legacy of the war and how it continues to infiltrate into tensions and conflicts today, it's just one concrete example that division was actually distorted in a manner that almost guarantees that there's going to be conflict from time to time, whether it's around fishing and those kinds of issues or whether it's around war games and naval exercises. And that's part of what was happening at the time that shelling took place.
I think that's why you ask why there's an aggression, confrontation. The seedbed of this conflict and tension and aggression is the fact that war never ended. That the war ended with the armistice justifies all this militaristic buildup and exercises. So that's why we are pushing for the replacing armistice with peace treaty, because without that, is theoretically continuing military tension is needed, because you are temporarily paused state of war. War can resume any time, theoretically. Until 1991, when these joint military practice happened, between South and USA. USA would fly bombers, and then they will drop in exercise dummy atomic bombs. It's a bomb set in shape of atomic bombs to show for 50 years after the war that any time atomic bomb can be dropped.
So you have to know that the U.S. Holds 80% of all the world's nuclear bombs. So, and nuclear submarine, about 12 some years ago, there were Chinese Navy were practicing dropping some kind of a bomb. And people were kind of curious why they were doing it in their own sea. And later, we were told that U.S. submarine was moving up north. So Chinese were, South and North Korean government were not informed, but Chinese knew. All the intelligence were, they knew, but except South and North Korean government. Even these days, that's what's happening.
I learned a lot just coming here, so.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Actually, we live in the ideological conflict between North and South, and also socialism and capitalism and communism and democracy kind of things. Actually, I was engaged in the student group for reunification when I was a graduate school student. At the time, I met many North Korean students, and nowadays, my friend, he's a North Korean, became a spy. Actually, he's not spy, but NIS, National Intelligence
Accused
Service,
of.
yeah, accused him as a spy. So now he become a spy, and now he got released from prison, but because he was innocent. Yeah, but NIS manipulate his immigrant record kind of things. So I was really sad, and then one of my other North Korean student, North Korean friend, he posted that about his feeling for his friend, the person. At the time, he said that I replied his Facebook. I'm very sad for this situation. At the time, he replied that I'm very afraid to be spy in South Korea. So if we change that the army ties to peace treaty, how much can we relieve this kind of tension? That's my question. But complicate.
I'm afraid that even we signed the peace treaty, the neocon, what we call the right-wing groups, would always find a way to justify. So that's really, especially to those defectors from North Korea. They came to South to find a home, and they are now being rejected, and they are being manipulated also. It's a really sad reality, and those things can only be possible, in my opinion, when the country really truly become democratized. All the system of justice is in place. As you know, recently the South Korean government fabricated Seoul city government worker visiting North Korea, and China said this, they fabricated it. So it's big.
Yeah, that's
So those things, I'm sorry, I don't know any of you are part of the neocon, but they are good at fabricating stories. They use every possible dirty means to obtain what they want. This will be an ongoing battle, but
No, I have a more general reaction to your question. And this is one of the reasons why I think Deanna made this film. It was made obviously for Korean audiences, but it was also made for the American public in general. Because as much as I completely agree with Reverend Kim that it's been impossible to talk about this history in the Korean community. Part of the reason is that there's no desire, no willingness, no curiosity, no interest in the sort of American public consciousness, you know, either to remember this war or to be concerned about it. And so it's very easy from a U.S. perspective to say, well, North and South Korea are still at war with each other, and that's a problem. But it's a war between North and South Korea. And what happens immediately is all of the history of U.S. involvement before the war, but also during the war, is completely, you know, made invisible. And I'm often asked by people, well, if the United States had not gotten involved, do you think the Korean War would have happened? You know, and my response to that is no doubt that there would have been some coming to terms at the end of Japanese colonialism. And some of that might, in fact, have been a violent coming to terms. But there is no way, you know, that if the Korean Peninsula had been freed of the outbreak of the Cold War, there's no way that the devastation that was created by that war would ever have happened. Which is my way of saying, and I was reinforced in this feeling by listening to Reverend Kim today, that if it were possible to remove the yoke of Western hegemony and Western imperialism from the Korean Peninsula, that Koreans could, in fact, resolve their 60 years of differences, which are real. I think it's not realistic to say that if they were freed from these external pressures, that they would walk hand in hand the next day. It simply wouldn't happen. And I know that there are psychologists in South Korea who have already been preparing, actually during a more optimistic period of Kim Dae-jung and Nam Moo-hyun, preparing exercises for South Korean young people and North Korean young people to learn how to understand each other and to re-embrace, you know, their common history and their common people. But they knew it would be a struggle, and no doubt it would be a struggle. But I think because of the kind of examples and spirit that Reverend Kim conveyed in his comments today, I have a lot of confidence that the Korean people could resolve those differences. For me as an American, as a Korean American, I feel that my primary obligation is to make us aware as American people that we were part of this and we continue to be, you know, in Korea for our interests and not for the interests of the Korean people. One other thing I'll say about that is that if you look at U.S. military South Korean alliance at the present time, and you look at the restaging of U.S. military bases in South Korea over the last decade, U.S. forces are no longer there primarily to deter North Korea. They're there as a regional basing for East Asia. And we all know that that basically means that Korea is now being used, and has been in the past, but especially now, as a staging ground for U.S.-China relations. It's the only land base on the Asian continent that the United States military has. I've always thought that South Korea has never been able to claim sovereignty. And my more pessimistic feelings in the present moment is that it's never been as difficult as it is under the present circumstances, because the administration and the military have woken up to the fact that we are behind in Asia. And they're frightened and worried about China. And the interests of all of the other Eastern, Southeast, East Asian, and South Asian countries with whom we have alliances, you know, are now countries that U.S. planners see in relation to the principal problem, U.S. relations with China, which makes it that more difficult for all Asians, including Koreans, to chart their own path. But that's, I think, what has to happen. And I'm confident that Koreans can handle a problem in Korea. We need to do a lot more as Korean Americans.
Okay. I think there's one hopeful sign is that generation thing, you know, I cannot even speak for Reverend Kim, but when I was growing up, some 10 years later, like the Reverend Kim in the 70s and early 80s, you know, in elementary school, middle school, and high school, until middle school. Every year we had a poster, anti-communism poster contest for every single student. You have to submit how you are committed to defeating North Koreans, and you draw them as a red pigs and ruthless people. They no longer do that. They cheer for the North Korean, you know, the delegation of Olympic thing. So, you know, I think that's, as a person of faith, there is a power that is greater than might. I think the Noam Chomsky just had an interview with a Korean newspaper, and he said exactly the geopolitical destiny of Korean peninsula, in between two, you know, Cold War and still going Cold War, military expansion. That one of the viable option for the stability and the prosperity of Korean people is that somehow Korean people coming together and becoming a neutral state.
Yes.
That's why I think it's only Korean people, yes, Korean American do that, but Korean people have to come together, North and North. So that's, I think, your question, that somehow we have to find a way to get out of this hostile coexistence. The people in power in both South and North need each other. It's like, you know, the extreme liberal and extreme fundamentals need to each other to coexist to their base. So, okay, any other questions? Yes?
I'd like to ask you about evangelism going on in North Korea, you know. So, as a pastor and Christian, I think the most important reason for peace treaty or unification is evangelism. That's what I think. So, I heard there are some pastors or churches in North Korea, and they just evangelize people in North Korea. So, my question is that why North Korean government allow pastors or churches exist in North Korea and evangelize people in Christ? I'm not sure it's right or not, but maybe they're doing that for their financial benefit or any other reason. Also, if yes, is there any limitation pastors can spread out gospel? Also, the final question is, what's the next step for pastor or theologian or Christians evangelize people in North Korea for our generation? What do you think?
Want to answer that? Definitely, North Korean government see benefit of having their official Christian body there. Definitely economic gains, their image issues. With my right, I cannot say they do really worship every Sunday. I visit there. I kind of agree that they only gather at times when we are there. But it really don't matter to me. The importance is that North Korean government allow Christian body to be part of a government ministry, because that's a channel we work. This channel we utilize. I wouldn't naively say that, wow, North Korea will be evangelized soon. But if you go to China, I visited China last year. Chinese government really cracked down on underground churches. But now, even official churches are growing so rapidly, Chinese government cannot control official churches. They're growing like a wildfire. So nowadays there's no distinction between underground church and official churches because it's growing so fast. I, as a Christian reason I'm engaging with them is that I want to open up maintain the relationship. When reunification happens, that we need some kind of relationship, official body to work with. We are preparing for this. Actually, our committee discussed sending a missionary there. So I went to Vladivostok, Russia, because Russia, I don't know whether you know that Russian UMC bishop is a Korean Russian young man. Eddie, what was it? Yeah.
Bishop.
Oh, I forgot his name.
But he's coming to the other meeting.
In April.
April.
He was an Emeritus Students 10 years ago. I met nice looking young man, but he's a bishop now. See, so we got to find a way to make sure that North Korean government do not look down on Christian groups in North Korea. We have to empower them. We have to let North Korean government to officially open up the church there. So one day, when things happen, look at China. China is still the communist country, but they are changing so rapidly. Churches all over now. You know, small church, they have 5 services on Sundays. Amazing thing is the biggest Chinese churches are being pastored by Korean Chinese. Largest Chinese church is being pastored by Korean Chinese woman. So I appreciate North Korean government allowing that, and we continually have to work with them. The power of Holy Spirit, we don't control. Holy Spirit will do his or her own work. And if God is living still alive in South Korea, God is still alive in North Korea. But I wouldn't be naive to say, oh, they are worshiping every Sunday like us. I told North Korean Christian officers, change your sermons, because every time I go, they preach same sermons over. Last 20 years. I told them there are more in the Bible than reunification. But if you go there, you will see Oxford Bible translated by late Bishop Yu Hyung-gi. You see the Bible there. North Korean government published, I think, 30,000 Bible. So you don't want to be naive, but you want to be a part of that change in North Korea.
I just think we need to remember that Christianity came to the North first, before the division and before the war. So there's a little joke that real Christians still remain there, their descendants are there. And one other thing is, I think it's a great question. I just want to challenge you and all the future Christian ministers to really think about what it means to be evangelized. Okay? Evangelism means bringing good news.
Right.
So yes, we need to go and make Christians, but we need to first bring, for now, the best evangelization is the establishing peace and reconciliation. And church need to grow, but we need to see, we don't want to see church grow in isolation or attachment to this good news. And South Korean church is a genuine example of that evangelization without commitment to the ministry of real good news. The fact that we cannot even talk about bringing two divided country and the people together, not just in society but in churches, talks about the vanity of evangelism.
Can I say something? Knowing nothing about evangelism and wishing to be polite. I want to make an analogy. I think this is an appropriate analogy. I showed this film in New York 3 or 4 months ago at a festival organized by Koreans. And a young woman came up to me after the screening, and she was very enthusiastic about the film, and I very much appreciated her. And I asked her about herself and what she did, and it turns out that she was at one point, maybe still is, a leader in the movement Link,
Yes.
Liberty in North Korea.
conservative.
Yeah. And I said, oh, well, that's great, because maybe you could show the film to your members. And she said to me, oh, no, we don't do that. You know, we just focus on human
Great.
rights issues. No, human rights issues today. We don't want the history. She literally said that. And it was very troubling to me, because on the one hand, I felt a part of her reacts to a film like this as a Korean, the way many people do. And on the other hand, in the work she does, there's a total disconnect. Now, I'm certainly for human rights, and I support struggles for human rights, but I don't, if it is an intent to ignore history and other realities. And secondly, if it's a tool, and if it's a tool that actually has political objectives, as some organizations that do human rights in North Korea, for principally regime change. So I don't support it under those conditions. I would say in the same way that the church has an incredibly important and powerful role to play. But what I can relate to in your comment about the Korean American church, and once again, I'm speaking out of ignorance, but I'll speak anyway. I had a conversation about 20 years ago with actually one of the leaders in the United Methodist Church. And we were talking about the very issue that you mentioned. There is incredible unresolved trauma. And he said among Koreans living in this country who are 45 years or older, that was 20 years ago. And he said, we failed as a church because as a Korean American church, we have not even provided an opportunity for people who have a common story and a common problem of not being able to speak that story. To find a safe place, as you were saying, a place like this, where people could, with each other, begin to share that history and begin to try to repair, to whatever extent is possible, the harm that that history has caused them. And I thought to myself, if the church cannot do that, then what is it for? And that's the point I'm trying to make. That, you know, I will march with evangelicals. You know, if we are in fact marching towards resolving the issues that we've talked about in other ways in our conversation today.
But at the same time, you cannot minimize the potential of evangelical churches for future of Korea. If you look at the humanitarian aid that given to North Korea, evangelical groups sent 100 times more than progressive churches. Once we mobilize them in right direction, energy is there. The problem with the liberal progressive churches are, they are so divided. I would say that damn arrogant. They don't know how to share. They worry about right and wrong. But evangelical groups, like a Good Samaritan run by Frank, what's his name?
Billy Graham's daughter,
Yeah. And he came out in CNN. And he was more influenced than any other people resolving the peace issues sometimes. But I agree with you. If they channel that energy into negative way, it really is a big problem. But my struggle with the working with the progressive churches, they are so individualistic, and they don't want to share what they have. So evangelical churches have a potential there. I met with the uncle of Kim Jong-il, so-called uncle, 3 times. He was in top position. I wanted to make a cross. Pine trees from Baekdo Mountain in North Korea. And I met with him 3 times. High officer. And after 3 times meeting, he met with me, serious face, said, why this thing cross is so important to you? I just found out it's a small piece of wood, he said. But I told him, to us Christians, that's the most important thing. I made a 30,000, I gave 15,000 to South Korea, and we shared it here. And we used, when we had a Jubilee celebration, we had tree, back to mountain pine tree, Halla Mountain South pine tree, and we put it together to celebrate that. We cried and cried. Maybe it's just emotional thing, but it's a symbol that North Korea is willing to work with us. Any possible opening, I would benefit. I would open it up. Look at China. We never thought that Christian church would grow that fast. Now government cannot control. Look at East Germany. Christians never gave up praying. And I cannot say that because of them praying that happened, but never giving up. Oh, we as a Christian at least have that. We don't give up. The power of resurrection there.
It had little to do with this collapse of the Soviet Union.
I believe they prayed.
Okay.
Okay, any other? Yes?
I'm very grateful and shameful at the same time, and I'm grateful that you're coordinating this event and inviting the Reverend and Professor and being here. I'm very, very grateful. But I'm also shameful that as a being Christians, have I done a lot of prayer toward reunification or that's really shameful for me. Well, I should pray more. And
4 o'clock in the morning.
Can I do it at 6 a.m.? Or 7.
So?
Alright, so my question would be, what would be our role, like in being a seminarian, to make more safe place to have a conversation, like continuously? It's really, well, being a Christian and being an international student here, I learned so much about Korea. And that really, that's the something. But I really learned so much about like history of Korea and the theology from Korea, and that like living here and studying theology, like constantly reminding me like how to live as a Korean. So can you like share a little more about how we like work together, like make a difference in the seminary setting, or like BU?
You know, Dr. Ring mentioned about link. I feel responsible for not being able to work with them. They were actually trying to do something for Korea. But there was only Horowitz, that's actually the Heritage Foundation, put a lot of money. I think seminary, I talked with the Reverend Chang, we want to provide some scholarships so that you guys can attend our conference in April. And if you keep holding this kind of gathering once a year, I will find a way to financially support it. But the problem with us, a person like me, this becomes a part of our response. I share about 5% of my life into this instead of 15%. While this right-wing groups spend their 55% of their time on this. So it's a losing battle. We need this is a school where Martin Luther King Jr. studied. We need the Nelson Mandela for our cause. We need the Martin Luther King Jr. for our cause. Having said that, there's no reason you cannot be Martin Luther King Jr. There's no reason make a Reverend Chang to be Nelson Mandela. I visited his jail, South Africa. They're ordinary human beings just like us. But they put the energy in focused way. While we are all, The problem with the progress people are, we are progress optionally. When conservative groups, it involves their profit making. So they put all the energy into this. So we got to think about. We need a. I would support finding a full-time position for person working for reunification. We used to have that. So by attending this kind of a seminar, actually there's a woman who studied at Harvard PhD program. She mentioned about you. She lives in Atlanta to have this in our church.
Yeah.
You know
Church
her?
Masquerade.
Yeah, okay. So we will be more intentional about these things. Instead of losing our young second generation to like Heritage Foundation and Horowitz groups, ultra right-wing groups.
Helen Moon.
Yes, yes.
Alina.
Yes, she's raising a child. So we need to be more intentional, and God will bless. Just like five bread, 2 loaves. I forgot.
That's powerful.
2 fish, 5
2
loaves.
fish and 5 bread. Miracle of 2 fish and 5 bread. But as a Christian, you need to never lose hope, faith. And these days, the power of resurrection, Christians do make a difference.
Amen.
I have a concrete suggestion. Growing out of my own experience meeting you, which happened about 2 months ago by accident. And I am a person who is constantly looking for other Koreans who have some similar concerns. And I must say, somewhat shamefully, that I had pretty much given up on the Korean community in the Boston area because it is so difficult here. And so I was very excited to meet your group when you were having your service
And then March Plaza.
in the Marsh Plaza. And I think, there are Korean students in the area, as you know, at different campuses, undergraduate and graduate. It would be wonderful if you could be a nucleus of making connections with other young people in the area. Not necessarily to harangue them with your agenda, but to at least open up the possibility that young Koreans in this area can expand the kinds of concerns that they have. And I don't think that there is another group in the Boston area that has the capacity to do it as your group. And so my hope is that, and I have a fair number of connections with other student organizations, and you probably do as well. And if you could somehow reach out a little bit and be a nucleus of a somewhat different Korean American organization, student organization, theological and non-theological, I think would be an incredible contribution.
And second generations.
Absolutely.
You have 2,200 Korean American students at BU alone, and including my daughter, would be eye-opening to learn about this. And speaking of being shameful, Reverend Kim and I should kneel down and cry out loud and repent. We were MD student like you in this place 20 years ago, and we were going boldly, not hosting event like this. And I think the Reverend Ramsay Liem is Professor Liem, I can talk to him. This movie is a great means of communicating and collaborating. I think he's more than welcome to show this or share this and whenever the possibility is there. So to do that. Do you have something to say?
Yes, one missing puzzle that I bring to our discussion today is the issue of North Korean refugee in Korea. Because the Reverend Kim, I'm really glad when you're mentioning about Jesus going to Samaria. That story just reminds me of the North Korean refugees in South Korea. They're already victimized, tortured, and traumatized, and they're being as a second, third citizen in Korea. as you mentioned, I think the South Korean government or churches fails, then. So, I guess my question is there any practical way that the churches, like U.S. churches or overseas, the Korean churches, to embrace that population and just give them a big hug? I mean,
There are about 500 of them here in the United States. 300?
yes, but we're talking about like couple thousands of
30,000 in Korea.
30,000 in Korea. They are invisible, and they try to correct their accent because they don't want to recognize as the North. So, is there any practical the way that we can involve?
You know that Kim Dong-ho Moksa,
Mm.
the church is run business hiring them. But the problem with the Korean church is that every Sunday, if they attend the church, they give them money. So every time you attend the church, they give $50 or something. It's really, really, Korean churches at times can be very disgusting. Well, there are a lot of good churches, really good churches working with them. It's just a transition, in my opinion, transition period. But church is one of the few institutions who should showing their compassion for them. I don't think the Buddhist groups are doing it. So church is always ready to open, sometimes with the bad perspective, but the church is always open to help people. So in my opinion, that's a good start. Good start.
The reason I ask this question is, we are international students who are serving for the American churches. So, the most of us, they have some kind of cultural, cultural difference. One day, we feel like, second citizenship here in the United States. So maybe once we, prepare well and then, serve for that, specific population, that will be great, I guess. So.
A lot of people are studying, especially gearing to that population.
Mm-hmm.
My associate pastor did a PhD at Ashbury, evangelizing North Korean defectors. Another associate pastor now back in Korea studied counseling for North Korean defectors. So church is really opening up that population. Soon, not 30,000, but 300,000, 3 million. We never thought that the Soviet Union would collapse. We never thought that at all. We never thought that China would be like this. We never thought Germany would be united. Why not Korea? So they will come. We want to send the missionary to Vladivostok to prepare that. He and I is working on that issue. Send the United Methodist missionary there. So anybody is interested in preparing that, you have a position there.
You Africa? Okay.
I also have a fair number of students who have worked with North Korean defectors who are in the New York area, in the New Jersey area. There's an organization there called SPARK. I don't actually know what the acronym stands for, but it's also church related. The students that I have who have volunteered there have done it very much from the perspective of social work. And they have tried very hard, to create opportunities for a very difficult group, to find some modest way, to find homes here in the greater New York area.
If you want to host a national seminarian gathering, or something like this, some of us will be happy to help you out.
Actually, after worship service in March Plaza, we will have some kind of plan to make a networking with other theological seminary, actually Tues and CTS and Drew, joining some
Great.
for making network. And also we are gonna make some public prayer for Korean government. Actually, there's a lot of things happening
Great.
But I want to stress that a lot of evangelical groups have more energy. I worry about apathy more than people with a different perspective. So I'm part of progressive movement, but I've been very disappointed with the apathy and individualistic attitudes. But evangelical groups, now there's a lot of evangelical groups involved in human rights and social justice issues. So do not reject them. They have a heart.
Question.
Yes.
You mentioned about the reunification of Germany, of East and West Germany. And you mentioned something about possibly doing a study on that or going over there
Oh, there are a lot of study done.
to make a sort of comparison or parallel?
Yes, yes. I actually visited there,
Reunification.
Berlin Wall last year.
And then how's that going?
There are a lot of study done.
Okay.
There are a lot of books written,
Sure.
and especially German church are very supportive of Korean reunification cause.
Okay.
It has been last 30, 40 years. They were supporting human rights concerns. German churches really supported a lot. So people talk about European churches are dying, but they don't know that a lot of good European churches are involved in social justice and peace movement, human rights concerns. They are, I would say, genuine Christians when it comes to peace issues.
Right. Okay.
Can I just add
Sure.
one more thing?
Yes.
I was going to say that this is, again, from the secular world, but it's not entirely, as I think about it. There is another sort of part of this movement that is beginning to develop, and it's with the peace and anti-war, the U.S. and global peace and anti-war movement. Often people of color, but heavily also white Americans. Their way of framing the issue as it relates to Korea has to do with the larger issue of the pivot to Asia, which probably many of you have heard about. The Obama administration has made a decision a year ago to shift its economic but also military priorities away from the Middle East to Asia. And so in theory, we're going to move from 40-60 stationing of U.S. military forces in Europe and the Middle East to 60-40 in Asia. And there's a lot of concern about this, as there is concern about an economic free trade agreement called the TPP. It's going to be the world's largest free trade agreement if it ever passes the 14 countries who are currently signed on. It is the U.S. effort to regain economic hegemony in the Asia Pacific. There's going to be a conference in Boston, which I unfortunately cannot attend, on April 19th, organized actually by the American Friends Service Committee, so I'm bringing and it's going to be a collaboration with many of the leading peace activist organizations because the peace community and the anti-war community is pretty ignorant about Asia and very ignorant about Korea. Right? And so that effort is to reach out to that particular sector, to put Asia on the map, and in the context of doing that, there will be a specific speaker about Korea. So that's going to happen in the Boston area as part of a series of gatherings that Embassy has organized, to try to do public education about what is currently happening with U.S. Foreign policy with regard to economics and defense issues. So I will pass you the information, and if any of you is here, it'd be a great opportunity to see a different part of a potential movement that we could encourage.
Great.
Yes? I was going to say that I really like the idea of trying to host a seminarians gathering, because I'm really taken by your comment about how much you have learned here in terms of your own history, and how, when we talk about first step is knowing our own history, and even how it links to other people's histories. So, I mean, that will be wonderful if we can figure out a way of doing that. And I work a lot, I serve a lot with Latino United Methodist College and high school and college students. And this summer, we're gonna have several groups coming here. And the main component of the program is learning about our own histories and stuff that they shouldn't graduate without knowing. That has to do with our community and our culture and our history. And I'm working also this summer to work with seminaries, Latino United Methodist Seminary students, basically concerned with these things. How can we really complement the education by learning about our own histories and struggles? That's really wonderful.
I think if you want to do something, I think Reverend Chang can help you out in finding a funding like Board of Education. There are a lot of resources available. In 80s, we had a lot of, she and I worked in the Student Christian movement in the 80s. I was a senior member, she was a junior member. Being young. But in 80s, we had a lot of previous group working together. But sadly to say that we were divided because of homosexual issues in late 80s.
Exactly.
And after that, in those days, African American leadership was very opposing to that. So nowadays, a lot of African American leadership in support of that. But we were all divided in the 80s. We sang We Shall Overcome in the 80s together, Latino groups, Asian groups, and we met at Unity Light Seminary. You need to revive that. You can have a national gathering, not only working with the Koreans, working with the other groups. And I wouldn't want to spend too much time on older folks anymore because we cannot change that much. High school kids, college students, seminarians, you can change that. You can change that. Church folks are very open. Church, they're not that vicious, even you're conservative. If you mention God, they're always open. You need to embrace that and enlarge your influences.
I want to just briefly, just wanted to add to that. As I see you up there, I was thinking also back going to 1980s. We did this kind of presentations across different ethnic groups, referring to different parts of the world. How our struggles really are rooted in the same difficulties, in different parts of the world. And so that, for me, that was very powerful back then in terms of my own formation as a seminary. And also in terms of, I'm thinking just how you mentioned that you're going to do this gathering of United Methodist bishops to go to North Korea.
And South.
And South Korea, but also I'm thinking how important it is for faculty in seminaries to know about this and figure out a way, thinking what I can do, figure out how do I build this into what I teach. Because we can, in the struggle and the issues of justice, have to do with the gospel. It can be built into any class. Doesn't matter the title of the class. They can be built if we know about it, if it's in front of us. But if we don't know it, then it's hard to even.
There is an organization called the Alliance of Scholars Concerned About Korea. It's a broad array of people, generally either open-minded or quite progressive. They began a teaching initiative 4 years ago. It's called Teaching the Korean War to End the Korean War. And there were about 80 courses that were given birth by that initiative. There are remarkable resources that have been put together to support that initiative. And so if it's a matter of also being able to access resources that will aid in the process of expanding the educational experience, we should really take advantage of it because these are really, really top scholars who have written very, very widely and broadly on this issue and now have some pedagogical experience trying to bring this into the classroom.
Professor Liem is being humble. That's what he has been doing at BC. And one of his signature courses is a Korean context, Asian context, and window into that. And when he had this event at BC, it's in January, I was so encouraged that 200 people plus, most of them young students, Korean, Asian, and all people of colors, attended and showed, and many of them enter into this area because of his course. So it's already, resources are there also. Okay, I saw, and that's one last question.
Do you still have Asian American ministry at Marsh Chapel?
We have an international
Okay.
Chaplain.
In the 80s, Marsh Chapel had a lecture series on Korea every year. We invited Professor Moon Dong-an and the Reverend Lee Young-bin from Germany. After that, we were labeled as a communist, but Marsh Chapel had a budget to invite them.
Okay, any other? Okay, I once again, I would like to thank Hee-sung and all the students who have been here, and I think we appreciate Reverend Kim and Professor Lim for sharing their time and their aged passion, but still fresh with us. And I hope that this will be a small ripple that will create wider ripples. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you. I didn't expect many people will come this way, so I'm very thankful for you guys. And could you introduce this performance a little bit?
Hello everyone, my name is Larry Hong. We're here from Berklee. Our group is called Sigimasae, which is the Berklee Korean Music Society. We're very happy to perform today. The first piece you will hear is a piece called Chimhyangmu by Hwang Byung-gi. And then we will play after that a traditional song called Himori, which will be all drums. What you see here is the Chongho, which is the hourglass drum. And it will accompany the Kayagum, which is the Korean zither. We hope you enjoy the show. Thank you.
Please give them a big hand again. For Hi, thank you all for coming this wonderful Korean night. My name is Min Hyung Lee, a PhD student here at Boston University School of Theology. I'm here to briefly introduce the movie we'll be watching today, as well as fill in some time while everything is getting set up. Today we'll watch a movie titled as Masquerade. As many of you may have inferred from the poster which is in the hallway, this movie is not about contemporary Korean society. Rather than it's about Joseon Dynasty, which began in 1392 and ended in 1910. It was the last dynasty of Korean history. This movie tells the story of the 15th king of the Joseon Dynasty, named Gwang Hae-gun. Just a fun historical fact here. Some of the Korean students who have Lee as their last name are descendants of the royal family of the Joseon Dynasty. FYI, I am one of them. That means that if the dynasty was still alive today, you all would not have the opportunity to meet me here. And even you may not have the privilege to see my face directly. But democracy, what a grand development of human history, right? Today you can see me directly. Even you can stare at me. Enjoy your democratic eyes. Anyway, returning back to our movie, the main plot of this film follows the story of the prince and the pauper. You may know the story, right? The prince and the pauper. The prince, yeah, you know it. The similarity between the novel and this film is about the carbon copy. So this movie begins as the king, Gwang Hae, asks his counselor to find the double to avoid from the threats of assassination, and the story continues. There is one more thing in this movie with which you are most likely familiar with. The peasant saying, which states, if one lacks power, is given power, he or she would use it much better than the pre-existing rulers. He or she would melt the cynical hearts of the powerful and rule the world with decency rather than fear. But the way the world functions appears far different from this. Thus, it may drive us to ask what is, if there even is, the best form of leadership within a society. This question is quite important for us all here, including Korean students. Perhaps the Korean Student Association chose this movie because they know how political authorities and other peoples in positions of predominance often abuse their powers within Korean society. In these days, as you may know, many Koreans blame the government for its exploitation of the values of democracy. They criticize how the wealthy use their economic power to dominate the poor. Even though they live in a democratic nation, many Koreans feel as if democracy is not beneficial for them, but only beneficial for the people who govern it and the selected few that reap mass amounts of wealth, typically through corrupt and abusive means. The marginalized, the powerless, and the poor and the weak, these people do not feel like democracy is for them. But we Koreans have a really beautiful tradition. We do not express our rage or suffering directly to others. Rather than, we express our rages throughout songs, dances, performances, that kind of things. In this vein, this movie today we'll watch can be understood as a modernized form of indirect expression of our rage. I may be overemphasizing this notion. Yeah, certainly there are other questions you may have after watching this movie, such as, who's that actor? He's awesome. Or who's the actress? How old is she? What's her name? That kind of things is fine. But I don't mean to belabor this idea and overwhelm you with the question that I have raised. Instead, I mean to provide a basic understanding of what this movie means to Koreans and why KSA chose this film for this special night of Korean Peace Week. I hope you all enjoyed this night. Thank you so much.